Hey guys, Cam at Inky Knuckles here, joining you. You're joining us hopefully for a early edition on a doubled up Saturday night art show. We have a special edition due to some time zone jumps. We have Mr. Warwick Johnson Cadwell, who is joining us today. Warwick's insanely talented fella with an incredibly unique style, and he's produced some of the more memorable pieces I think a lot of collectors can attest to, on top of his insane sequential work. Warwick's an awesome dude and incredible artist, and he's joining us here today. How you doing, Warwick?
I'm doing fine, thanks. Doing fine. So
We've got how's the weather out your way?
it's sunny today and cold. It's just a bit cool, but no, it's been a bit of a wet week, but it's good for this time of year. So
for anyone watching, Warwick's a big runner, but he recently got attacked by wolves. So he had to go on some meds for a little bit after that happened. But he's safe and sound now. His art has a little more bite to it now.
Yeah, legs back on too.
Fun intended, but it's good. You're feeling good. Your art is amazing as always, sir. I think we're gonna have a few people have hopped in already. Don't be afraid to hit us up with some questions. I know myself specifically, I tend to I'm really enthralled by Warwick's style. It's so unique and dynamic that I'm really curious to see what he does. So maybe Warwick, just tell us what you're laying out here.
This is Moby Dick scene. So this is sort of how it all starts all the time. It's just lots of sort of spidery leg line drawings, and then sort of sometimes they come out fairly happily, and sometimes just sort of go back over and over and over and change bits and redraw them. So I thought that seemed sort of fairly good way to at least get started for this, because I didn't realize quite how much I'm paying attention. So until I try and do some live drawing or drawing at cons and things like that, where suddenly the line starts to wander and you don't always notice till afterwards either. So I thought keeping it loose would be good. So this is Moby Dick, and it's one of those issues which sometimes pops up with various bits, trying to get you've got something enormous as big as a whale you're trying to fit in, but also you want to fit in characters and figures and sort of facial expressions, and how do you try to manage all of that in a single page. So there's a few tricks with these this sort of thing, I think.
Well, this was an interesting one because the commissioner asked, and the commissioner Jason, he's a really good guy. He commissions a lot of work, and he kind of lets artists flex their muscles a bit, but he requested Moby Dick, a scene from Moby Dick, whatever you wanted, as long as we get to see the whale at some point. And and he said he preferred A4, because I think Jason collects a lot of A4 or 9x12 size pieces, but he did say that if you wanted, he prefers A4, but if Warwick thinks it won't work on A4 and has to work on A3, we'll talk again about it. But you were happy to tackle it on A4. So all the challenges that you just described, you're also doing it on smaller paper.
Well, whether I get it right or not is difficult, but that is really the key. There's trying to get that an idea of scale, and it often works really well on thumbnails. So really tiny bits, you can do a really good looking sort of idea, some big shadow or some great something looks good, but then trying to get it up onto a bigger size you think might be easier, but sometimes those shapes don't sort of translate so well. So always fun to try it out.
Awesome. So Sam Drawson asks, how long do you spend drawing each day?
um, Probably not anything like as long as I think between coffee and making coffee and drinking coffee as well. But no, a lot. I've got no sense in sort of keeping sensible hours about it. It's something I do for work, but it's also something I do for fun as well. So I've done the long drawing days on various projects and then put my feet up and still picked up a pad and pen and got on with sort of my own drawing. So it does vary a lot, but I don't know. So the
Say,
answer is yeah. I'm not really sure, but I mean it's very often what I'm thinking about. So, and I have
say
had jobs where I've taken sketchbooks to the work and been able to draw instead of working as well, or when I should have been working, I should say.
what's it? You're kind of. I wouldn't say you're an anomaly in that sense, Warwick, but I know we took your commission list, and if you weren't done a commission within like every 2 days, you were emailing me and apologizing for, for being slow, which is insanely rare because Sam says good answer. He appreciates
Oh, cool,
the
thanks.
response. But I thought that was very interesting because I keep telling you that it's totally fine. Take your time, do your thing. But yeah, I think you're so apt. And first time you and I ever talked, you just told me how much you loved drawing, and I think, and this is me chiming in as someone with zero artistic ability, Sam, but I think Warwick has really struck a balance between knowing this is his professional job. He takes it serious, takes his deadline serious, and the quality of work, his work serious. But it's that passion is really what's driving you. If from my perspective, Warwick, I don't know if that sounds wrong. Let me know. But
No, I don't know. I think it's fine. I mean, it is. Hearing people talk about it sometimes about you know their work as sort of being office hours, and they don't. And you're hearing people talk about not wanting to draw because they've been work. It makes them feel like they're at work. Well, I don't necessarily feel. I don't understand that quite as well. I mean, I do understand it sometimes, but especially when you just want to put your feet up. But I just do enjoy it, and so even sort of doing odd jobs, different things, something totally different, or I like drawing monsters and all this sort of stuff, but I like drawing all sorts of things, and so yeah, no, find always something
awesome.
to enjoy, whatever it is I'm drawing.
Spider L77 asks or says, I snagged one of his amazing cargo ship prints earlier this year. What's your favorite monster, Warwick?
I don't know. There's just loads. They've all got personality. I think other than the cargo ones, I don't know either because I draw someone's car. There was a few Kongs and Godzillas, and there was a couple of Krakens as well, and they were great because there were tentacles all over the place and all sorts. But then, someone would have another great idea, and I did summon a Pegasus unicorn for his daughters, and they've all got some funny bits, some that are really interesting to work on, and particularly when you sort of put out requests like that, or for people to request what they might want, you get some crazy sort of ideas or responses, which was good.
And I'm curious too because I think a lot of people associate some of your work with Hellboy, obviously, and with the Magnolaverse, and a lot of people really love like your Victorian era stuff. For your own person, like growing up, or in term, like just kind of building off that question, what were you big into like H.P. Lovecraft, or were you big into Toho Godzilla growing up, or is it just kind of you just kind of loved it all, or was there one specifically that you were always kind of drawn to?
I think it was mainly Indiana Jones, Flash Gordon, and Star Wars. But growing up, the stuff we had access to was different. For most of my childhood in the UK, we had 3 TV channels, and so we'd be watching like Sherlock Holmes, black and white Sherlock Holmes, or Charlie Chan, or stuff like that. That was what we had access to, because there really wasn't much other stuff like that. So
Yeah.
and so Hammer horror as well, if I ever managed to stay up late enough to watch them, and that was a big deal. And then in terms of book, I don't know quite what it was. Maybe it was following on from the same thing, but I found I didn't read much Lovecraft until much more recently, but things like Treasure Island and other Stevenson, sort of Dr. Jekyll and stuff like that, and or Dracula and things like that. That was always good fun.
Oh, cool. No, it's interesting. I'm always curious about people's sensibilities, because sometimes you can see their preferences for what what they enjoyed growing up, or what they how they want to draw, is based on what they prefer, and then other people are just kind of different circumstances kind of dictate how your style evolves in that sense. But it sounds like yours is kind of a bit of a combination of both, because even just you describing your limited access to TV shows and into fiction and stuff growing up, and kind of what you just described, I think makes perfect sense, in how your styles kind of evolved, and what you do, which is great. And I think what's awesome about you, Warwick, is just you're so open-minded. So you're not sitting there saying, I refuse to draw this, or I refuse to draw this. I think it's really created some very interesting pieces from you. And I think that's why collectors are really drawn to your work, on top of it just being awesome.
Wow.
But so before I go off on too many tangents here, Francisco asks, when you draw those fantastic urban scenes, do you work from reference?
I do, if it's those sort of pencil drawings. I love doing them, but it's all from phone, really. I try to do live drawing, stuff like that, but I don't know, it ends up differently. What a lot of the pictures is just taken on the phone and then drawn from my phone, and so you zoom in on bits and you can sort of mess around with it. But usually, and it's photographed, and then maybe some characters will put in. I mean, there's a couple where you've seen someone walking about. I remember the character, so then when I come to add them, I can put them in where I want to. So there's a sort of a bit of compositional sort of fiddling around with it as well. But the urban stuff, that's usually photos.
Oh, that's very cool. And this is just me being on the other side of the world from you. It's funny because obviously I've never been to where you live, so I think I create this image of what Warwick's day-to-day life looks like, and it's these urban scenes with monsters and cargo ships with more monsters, and he lives in this Victorian house, and it's haunted, and it's just really unique. Because
that's it. That's all right. That's all exactly right.
But honestly, I think it's just the aesthetic you create with all the pieces you draw. Everything is world building. Everything has created this sense of, it's not just this standalone image. You can almost imagine what the world is around that image. And I honestly, and I'm not trying to blow too much smoke, but I think that's really a testament to your work. It's not just a singular image. It's an entire world. Here's the scene that's happening within the world. At least that's how I view it.
Because the drawing of there's the phone. It's a funny one to got onto this subject with, because the phone is obviously the that sort of drawing is, I am drawing specifically from reference, and to some extent just sort of copying.
Yeah.
the image, but a lot of this is it's sort of made up. So it feels a bit like I don't play video games, and it makes it feel like that's the sort of puzzle that I'm doing instead. It's got that sort of it's like a crossword or something like that, where you're just sort of trying to figure out how the picture, whatever you're going to do, is going to work out. And so there's a lot of thinking about it. When you're working on one drawing, it's giving me ideas for another one to do. So that's why sometimes also these things come in sort of groups. So I can't remember. I got onto the cargo stuff just because I was struggling after Christmas to try and get anything done. So I thought I'd just reset. Won't try and do any things I was finishing or trying to get done around the new year, and just drew a tramp steamer on a large size piece of paper, and that's how it all started. That was the one that then got printed out, made into a print, and everyone else could join in on. So.
Well, and it was really cool too what you did with that, with how interactive you got that. You put out the high res scan for people to work with, and people were adding their own monsters on Twitter, and that was a ton of fun. I think.
Yeah, it was good. It was good fun to do. It was great fun to see as well. It was great fun to sort of see people's responses.
Well, I was surprised at how great some of those turned out. Like, even when people are like, yeah, I threw this guy here. I think it was such a cool template that people could just kind of throw their wonky, goofy ideas at it, and the results were, we should almost just get everyone's permission and just make a little sketchbook of everyone else's submissions, along with your own, because there's a ton of cool stuff that came up there.
Yeah,
Sure.
yeah, no, it would be cool. I do need to. Yeah, I've done a few sort of little sort of self-published books, and cargo. It's come to a bit of a stop at the moment, but that was going to be the next one, and so the idea was that maybe I could, put some of those into that one with the other sort of collected boats and ships.
Yeah, that was really great. So Spiderell just says, I asked for Kong to go alongside a Godzilla print on my wall. They were asking about your favorite monster. So we got a Kong and Godzilla fan. And Spiderell, if you're still there, is the Godzilla print like a Toho print, or was it like just a separate print? I'd be curious. And then Sam asks, who are some of your favorite artists?
It's a tricky question, I think, because I change my mind so often. But I think Mike Mignola, it shouldn't be a great surprise to anyone. And then Mick McMahon as well, who's he's a 2000 AD, he's a British comic, and he was he's worked in that. And I mean, that's when I was a nipper. That was the comic to read, and just his art in that was so inspiring, changing so often. But he's done all sorts. But I think The Last American was possibly something big that people might know generally. But he also did a Hellboy story as well. A Hellboy, he gets married. It was in Mexico, but didn't end up in the Hellboy in Mexico trade. But that was a good one.
Yeah.
So yeah, Mike Mignola, Mick McMahon, and then lots. And it's just looking around just to see so many people making amazing artwork, and it's just so inspiring, and it makes you kind of get on, and it makes me kind of get on and want to do something more, but it's just so many people working so well.
It's funny you bring up Mick McMahon. Someone had posted something on Twitter this week, I think just acknowledging his work and how great it was. And it's funny because over here, I don't know if a lot of collectors know a lot about him.
Yeah.
And it's one of those things. There's always a little bit of a divide. And if you're only reading if you're over here and you're only reading North American comics, it's definitely easy to miss. But my own ignorance too. I didn't know much about him, and then I got digging and doing some Google searches and some image searches, and he's outstanding.
Oh yeah.
And maybe because you look at like Brian Boland and his 2000 AD rise, and he did get a lot of traction over here, and everyone over here, especially collectors, know who Brian Boland is.
Yeah.
And because he's amazing in some of his stuff, and honestly, the Killing Joke pages are about as top tier as it gets for collectors, especially over here. So, but it's just interesting. I think if you're a North American, specifically, Canadian or American collector, um, don't hesitate to look outside the box. Check out the European stuff. Read 2000 AD, because there is so much incredible art happening across the pond that we just aren't exposed to, and unless we go looking for it.
Yeah, you got to go and get out and look for it. I mean, we're crazy because, maybe it's just me, but in the UK, we're just, Europe has got so much. We know, Mobius and whatnot from France, or from, there's just such a massive scene and so many different styles, and styles that embrace all sorts. And so I am constantly feeling like an idiot and feeling quite humble that I don't spend more time looking out and around.
Well, the beautiful thing about social media is a guy like you, Warwick, you don't go unnoticed for us over here, because you do maintain a fairly strong online presence. And it's awesome, thank God, because and I'm just speaking from North American standpoint, that we have been exposed to your work, but so many artists just aren't aren't uh, aren't active on social media, and so many artists kind of fly under the radar, especially if they're not North American or doing a ton of North American comics.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
sorry, Warwick, go ahead.
Well, I was going to agree. It's you got to. I mean, I'm quite happy to keep putting stuff out. It's. I think I started 100 years ago blogging just because I was filling up sketchbooks which, weren't getting seen much. So I had an illustration agent, but we were much more. It seemed to be much more geared toward sort of fairly starchy business magazines and stuff like that. And so I was drawing monsters at home, and no one else was seeing them. So I started to blog and put them out on those. And so,
Awesome.
they might just stayed in my sketchbook if I hadn't bothered doing that.
No, it's good. That promotion needs to happen, and you get your work out there, and I think your aptitude and your willingness to get out there, and not just it's not just self promotion, but you're engaging with people, encouraging people to draw, things like that, and yeah, I think that's probably the reason you and I hooked up, essentially. It was Mr. Troy Nixie told me, you have to go talk to this guy. And then he ran the introduction, and I kind of known your work a little bit sporadically, but I give credit to Troy. Troy's like, no, check out Warwick's work and talk to him.
Oh no, I appreciate it. Thanks, Troy, because it's been great. So.
No, Troy's awesome, and he's got an eye for incredible art, and he's a huge promoter of all things good, folks, and all things good art. So so Spider just says, I asked him about the Godzilla print. So your cargo ship Kong, they've got the Godzilla print is Godzilla rising out of the sea above the famous Hokusai wave. It's completely different stylistically, but he says he likes the contrast. I'm going to get back to that. I just had a question to ask you, Warwick, about stylistic stuff, but Spider also asks, do you get lots of ideas while running? They say they go running and find it really great for being creative.
I would say I don't know until you go out, and sometimes don't. So I mean, excuse me. I'm not a great runner. I spend most of my time out, puffed out, and wanting to stop. So there's that barrier to get through. And then other times you just end up getting into a mind, you start to, your daily worries sort of, I brought them out with me rather than, leaving them behind. So that's the problem. But then you just sometimes, solutions to things you've been thinking of just suddenly pop out of nowhere. So I find it easier to sit down and draw if I'm making up ideas or looking for things to develop. But I've had a few occasions where, whilst I've been out, suddenly an answer has come to something, or I put two things together which were sort of two, separate and useless ideas, but suddenly came together to turn into something that I could sort of make active, get on with, and turn into a story or an image or something like that. So it does help. Or it
Yeah,
has helped in the past, but I wouldn't guarantee it for myself.
well, that's interesting to hear that from both of you because I find, and I can't speak for everyone. I'm obviously not an artist, but I write quite often,
Hmm.
and not that anyone cares, but I found personally, I find the best stuff, the most creative stuff comes from kind of a place of happiness and contentment, and if you're running or engaged in physical activity, and if things kind of click, I like to think it's that physical well-being has helped. You know,
Yeah,
creativity is coming from a place of happiness. Is what I've found personally. Um, and it's interesting to hear you guys kind of say something similar. So, um, yeah.
yeah.
Sorry, go ahead, Warwick. You're going to say
Well,
something nice.
I mean, I'd say I'd agree. And because your subject might not always be particularly cheery, or it might always not always be. It might be something that's, making me angry or making me, so depending on the point you're making,
Yeah.
I'd be making, or the idea I'd be drawing, or something like that. But yeah, you need to get a sort of be in the comfortable position of sort of whether that's running or, you know, having a good walk or something like that, or getting engaging something that it does sort of settle you, sort of make you comfy, because it could be something that's quite serious or quite, you're quite wired up about that you want to get down. So yeah, there needs to be sort of an element of, you don't want to be panicking all the time, or you won't get too far if you're panicking all the time or worried sort of super seriously about
No,
stuff. So,
absolutely.
but you can't. Yeah, so it's not like, oh, you cheer up and then sit down and get on with it. You sometimes got to find some way of just leveling things down, so it's easier to work.
Well, I think, well, and one of the, and this is just a shameless plug a bit, but I was talking to, because some of our initiatives just with the Inky Knuckles group going forward is really trying to promote two things with kids, and they're not necessarily mutually exclusive, but promoting, health, wellness, physical activity, and creativity,
Mm,
and I think for kids, it's important to have creative outlets and physical outlets. I
yeah,
think, and a lot of kids will really lean into one or the other. Um, but I think we're doing some initiatives around locally to just try and promote um, you know kids who are creative. Don't be afraid to be active, and kids who are really active, don't be afraid to be creative. I think it's just, and just like we've just been talking about, you're engaged in health, fitness, wellness, and you're also, one of the best artists on the planet. It's not that you've just chained yourself to your desk and you're trying to, just create and grind, and you're smoking cigarettes the whole time, and it's this old school, like, yeah, just,
yeah. No, yeah. That doesn't that. I mean, I used to do. I don't know. I used to do silly hours and stuff, and because I used to do night shifts as a day job, and then used to work deadlines where you work all night or work night shifts, and that stuff's crazy. You got to get some rest. You got to, put your pen down and get a decent amount of sleep and stuff like that. And I don't tend to need loads of sleep, but I've certainly those days of sort of lasting as long or 2 or 3 hours trying to get it whilst on deadline. So that's all gone. I'll give myself a few more hours than that now. And yeah.
So Francisco asks, have you seen Hugo Pratt's work, Corto Maltese and other stuff? The very famous Italian cartoonist.
Yeah, I know it, but I haven't really read much of it. And I always, every time I see it, I want to get, have a good read of it. I did a commission of one for at Thought Bubble last year, and it looks amazing, and I don't know it, and so it's on my list of things that I'd better sort myself out with, get sorted.
Well, that's good. And Francisco, I haven't seen enough of that either. I think that I'm kind of the prototypical, North American comics reader collector, and I think I've just been fortunate enough to create enough friends internationally, people to kind of guide me in the right directions. Because the North American comics growing up in a small town, all I had was XMen and Batman stuff, which was amazing. I'll never say anything bad about that. But I think with comics especially, I say this constantly, like, we're in such an amazing age of comics. We have access to so much great stuff. Even if you spent 12 hours a day looking at art and reading comics, you'd never read all the comics, look at all the great art. There's so much amazing work out there. It just need to step outside the box just a little bit. So yeah, I think we're in an amazing age right now. I really do. I know myself. I take one step outside the North American section at my local comic shop, and it just opens up this entirely new world of incredible stuff. So
it's quite good to sort of get tips and stuff, because some of these things can be a bit daunting. You go into looking at the manga section or European comics, or even just pick a country, and there's loads there, and you just don't know what the first thing to pick up is. And so I must admit, I'm sometimes guilty of just walking past rather than having a nose or finding out. So I sort of make these hit lists of books that I do need to pick up, and then end up never really getting around to doing it. But there's lists. I've got lists of lists.
So Jetboy says, the first thing I thought when I heard Moby Dick, I want to see Warwick's Queequeg. Tickles me.
Well, here he is, sort of coming together. So
Warwick, and just a process question. You laid out some pencils, just really rough, and then you're light boxing over top. So you have 2 layers of pencils, right?
Yeah, no, this is just I use a lot of this layout paper, so it's thin. And is it? Or I'm just the light is dwindling, and is it all right? Can you see it all clearly?
Oh yeah, no, it looks great. It looks good.
But so and so this is how the the process goes, and sometimes I can go from one drawing to artwork almost instantly, but other times, I spend a lot of time just over different layers or just redrawing it all together. So it's quite good, and I've got to try and remember whereabouts my page line is. So and then it goes onto the light box. And so
awesome. Yeah, no, this looks great. I was it was. And before we started, sorry, Jetboy just says, Corto Maltese is must-reading. IDW has the entire series out in the US and very nice albums.
Oh, brilliant. Well, that'll be a go-to for me next year. That's cool.
Yeah, that thanks for sharing that, Jetboy, because that's the other thing too. We it's weird, the access we get to certain things, and I think for us, just being, we're close with Gerardo Zaffino and his father's work. It's hard to find Jorge Zaffino stuff because, like you said, IDW will print certain things, and then other things just kind of, other European or South American stuff will just go under the radar, and it won't get a wide release over here. And that's why I think Sergio Tapia is another one that
I was going to say it feels exactly like it, and you kind of you wonder you're going to think right, this is time to catch up, and then they release a big album or something, and it's quite pricey, and you're panicking, and then you miss it, and then a couple of years later you'll think, well, I'll have another look, and those books are all sold out, and they're all vastly expensive on the internet, but online, but yeah, there are plenty, and they do collect them more and more now, so just need to be a bit more throw caution to the wind and get some of those big fat sort of collections.
Yeah, it was interesting. I'll continue that point here in a second, but we got another question from Rich. Asking, as an artist and an art teacher, Warwick has such a distinctive style. Has he always drawn this way? And did an art teacher ever try to get him to draw differently?
To draw properly? No. Yes, I've always drawn this way, but this is obviously different than how I have drawn. I mean, I used to draw. I look at sketchbooks from 20 years ago when I was at college, and the drawing now is in some places is very different, and some is exactly the same. This is I'd never got to a state of sort of a level of kind of competence in terms of accuracy or whatever, and then decided to put a style on top of it. I can get things fairly sort of accurate and in terms of how they look, but it's not the way I kind of work, and so this isn't a style I've sort of imposed on whatever I was doing before. This is just the way my drawing has developed. It's just making decisions as I've been working out how to do things. So if you're trying to draw a movement, or if you're trying to show a face or whatever, there's a sort of abstraction involved. You can't just what I'm trying to say is that there's different shortcuts that you sort of learn, or you watch how people work, and you look at those, learn from them, and adapt them. And so this is the way I've drawn them. So it's not been necessarily. I don't think I had a particularly great art teacher up until I got to. We had a foundation a year before a degree course. I was on an illustration degree, and the foundation teachers were great, and the illustration was great. But they were also quite. They kind of let us. The course was quite. It was good. They just let us all get on with our stuff, so they didn't. They talked to us about our work, but they didn't try and make us work one way or another. And the course was quite good like that. If you got on with it, there was a few folk who wanted to really learn different skills or be shown skills and stuff like that, who didn't get on with it as well. So the question, it is. This is how my drawings always. It's always led to this point. Perhaps that's a handy way of saying it, and not really through a teacher, but through people showing me the right things to look at, the right directions, or the right things to think about, has made it easier.
So it's been kind of just stylistically, just kind of an organic evolution, of what you've always done, and then, a lot of self-education, a lot of paying attention to other artists to fine tune those mechanical details, not specifically influencing your style, just helping.
Yeah, well, I've never. I get just it. It's not sort of. I just don't think of it so much as a style that I'm doing. It's just the way I'm drawing. And so by looking at other artists, if I got stuck, I think I've mentioned that a few times, but before in different conversations. But if you ever stuck with how to draw, I used to, hate drawing noses, and then and they'd always look awful. And this was a long time ago. And then I realised there was a Marvel Comics where they just did a little shadow instead underneath, and he didn't draw the nose at all. He just drew this little sort of almost like a sort of a little triangular Hitler moustache, but that's all it needed. And so for a while, I just didn't draw a nose at all, but just a little bit of shading underneath. And then after that, you look at different ways other people are doing it until you get quite a language for it. So
That's interesting. Do you remember which artist that was, or was it?
It was one of the Bushimas, I think,
Oh, cool.
but I can't remember which, or if it definitely was. I mean, I think there's stuff like that. Thinking about it, there's and it's those sort of people who work like that. I think the Mark Silvestri was doing something similar, but he also, I can't remember specifically, but yeah, no, it was more older stuff, but that sort of classic Marvel. But it was just that one, because then they'd look at something else and see how, you know, Gustav Klimt might have done or something like that. You look at all sorts of, animation and actual sort of classic art, and then you look at comics, and you'd be looking at stuff all over.
Oh, that's interesting. Curious, Warwick, when you were younger, those were early '90s. What you just alluded to.
Yeah.
When you were, establishing yourself, you were an artist you've been an artist for a long time, and you're reading those old books. Are you, like, at that time, were you reading them as a fan, or were you reading them as an artist, trying to pick up different techniques, or was it, combination of both?
I think it was, no, I think it was as a fan. I think it was just trying to, it was just, yeah, it was, I just enjoyed the stories. And so
Cool.
any way I could get hold of them, stories like that, and read that sort of stuff. And I was enjoying the drawing. So I didn't really think about, I mean, I was literally copying, some of the ways that they were drawing and copying the pictures from them, and, then getting annoyed because they looked terrible. But then I'd sort of draw my own stuff, and even tracing stuff, way back, just to see. But I mean, it was more to do with enjoying the stories and the characters, rather than me having any sort of idea of improving my drawing skills. I think the drawing skills were just always, it was just the repetition that that's worked. I mean, that's there way back as a nipper. I wasn't thinking about that the drawing would get sort of better.
Awesome. Well, that's interesting to hear. I'm always curious on people's perspectives, because, obviously I love comics, loved them my whole life. And, the common thing about people who love comics and who love art is the passion surrounding it. But it's interesting to hear, what comics are to different people. Some people, some artists, they're a resource,
Yeah.
and like you said, and, my presumption would have been, you would have been approaching them more as a resource, as a tool for applying your trade. But to hear you say that, no, you just love the stories, it's really cool to hear. But so Sam asks, do you have a dream project that you would want to work on?
It's a funny question to answer, because because I've worked on Tank Girl, and I've worked on Samurai Jack, and I've worked with Mike Mignola on, Mr. Higgins and Our Encounters with Evil. I've just, my dream projects are all out there. I've kind of done them already. I don't know. I kind of feel like it'd be a bit rich for me to suggest something else, and I don't know what it would be. I mean, I like doing my own stuff. Which is great. It's great fun. But there's a million projects I'd love to have a go at. But I kind of feel like maybe I've had my share already, because I've been able to work on some amazing, and and in comics, but also in film as well. I've worked on Missing Link for Leica, and that was just a magical experience. But I think maybe someone else should have a turn. But so yeah, no, I yeah, it's a funny question. I think the answer is always going to be something of my own, in some form, or created with somebody else, something new. Maybe that's the ideal answer.
Well, it's interesting too, because I think, with the group of artists that we represent, there's a fairly strong Mignolaverse vibe, and
Yeah.
and yourself and Brett Parson have both worked on Tank Girl. Brett's actually currently doing the ongoing thing, which is now under Eric
Albatross.
Powell's imprint, which is really cool. But it's just interesting to hear you say that, because any artist that's in our group that's worked in the Mignolaverse, and Sam, I think if you ask most of them the question, just like the answer would be similar to what Warwick said, getting to work on Mike's properties, getting to work with Mike in some capacity is kind of been a dream for those people involved. And I think Brett's a lot the same. I won't speak for Brett, but I know him working with Alan on the Tank Girl stuff, and him even working with Eric Powell, for the Goon stuff. Very similar answer probably to what Warwick just gave. So I'll just add on to what Sam asked Warwick. Which Marvel or DC character would be a dream for you? Something within the big two, the more mainstream stuff.
Oh man, I don't know. I've wandered away from that stuff, which is, I mean, I love it so much, and loved it so much, and I really don't. I don't know what's going on there at the moment or nowadays. So it would be looking at sort of classic characters, I think. So I mean, the Avengers are always awesome. But,
I'm trying to think.
I mean, I think that the more I'm reading at the moment is sort of the old classic Draculas and stuff, which is no surprise, I suppose, to anybody. But that's sort of the gruesome sort of horror gear. But I don't know. There's like with all these, just being able to sort of have a go at some really sort of some cosmic sort of Silver Surfer stuff, or something sort of out there, but really in that kind of, really embracing that kind of sort of classic Marvel thing. And there's Batman's such an interesting character, but so much been done with, and it's kind of, you wonder whether you're going to be able to be helpful by adding anything to it.
Yeah, Batman's always a funny one, because I think, I can't speak for everyone, but most of us love Batman in some capacity. There's, anyone who read comics, watched movies, there's a rendition of Batman, or, there's an iconic version somewhere. But like you said, he's just been done so many times. It's so challenging to see someone take him in a new and interesting direction, because it's just been done so many times. And that's not to slight anyone working on it. For me specifically too, some of my favorite fiction elements have been Batman movies or Batman comics. It's just from a creative standpoint, and that's interesting to hear you say that, Warwick, is that I often think if I was writing a Batman story, what would I do? And I am just at a loss. I have no idea.
Yeah, and there's also an element as well. Some of the characters, the fans love them so much, are so keen that you kind of want to do them justice. You don't want to do anything too sort of crazy. I don't know. Sometimes seeing totally different renditions of characters by different people. I remember sort of Bill Sienkiewicz when he sort of started to throw out those crazy Batman stuff, or the Daredevil, and it was so a million miles away from the comic strip stuff. It just looked amazing. But then you know that some people aren't going to want to see that sort of stuff. I mean, they don't mind now, but you don't want it to be, people have got their favorite characters, and so if there's a great story written by someone, a great writer is just about to come out, and then they find the artist on it is someone sort of totally left field, or some, or someone like me that that just might not get on with. So
that's it's interesting you bring up Sienkiewicz, because I think from my experiences and the folks I talked to, Mike Mignola and Bill Sienkiewicz are probably the two most universally beloved creators.
That is, I think, pretty right, pretty spot on there.
Especially because the collector's eye and the collector's standpoint is quite a bit different from the artist standpoint. So I've always tried to pay a lot of attention to what artists are telling me as well, because you guys have such a keen eye for things. But that is the one thing that is just like universal. Sienkiewicz and Mignola,
Yep.
So, which is great. And I mean, any accolades that either of those two have gotten or get is insanely well deserved. So Sam says, I think a Fantastic Four done by Warwick would be amazing. And Sam,
Yeah. Well, you see, asking suggesting them, they all sound fantastic. They'll all be amazing, But if it's sort of say, as you did, the question is which one, then it's like, well, I wouldn't know where to start. But someone says, well, Fantastic Four, I'm thinking, well, yeah, I'd love to have a go with that in the instant.
well, and bear with me, Sam. I will I'll share my screen here just for a second. I don't want to take it off of Warwick's drawing, but Warwick did a recent Galactus Silver Surfer commission that is insanely cool. He wasn't quite with the group yet. I think that was for your Emerald City list, right?
Yeah, yes, it was. Well, it was kind of the fallout from that. So I had a few from Emerald City, and then it was like a help. I'm not going to be at Emerald City, and I've paid for my plane and accommodation. And all that. So there was like a panic station. So there was a few commissions came after that. So.
Yeah, that one's outstanding. But I'll pull a picture of it here and show it in a second. And then Jetboy says Silver Age Avengers versus Dracula. Yeah, sorry, Warwick, go ahead.
Whoa.
Jetboy, who are the Silver Age Avengers? Just so I'm not exactly sure which squad that is.
Oh, I've got my mind on a time where there's like so many different Marvel characters sort of flying through the Avengers at that stage. But maybe I've got the wrong ones. But
so I'm.
I think my temptation is always going to be to go with Dracula, just because I've gone a fair way down that path so far, and I'm still finding it fun to carry on. So maybe that's more likely. But then again, as soon as you start mentioning any of those Silver Age characters, then I'll be suddenly thinking what a great fun job that would be. Hello?
Sorry, I muted myself for a second. My
Thank goodness for that.
Screaming bloody murder at the moment. But yeah, no, I'm sharing your Galactus piece right now.
Cool.
So
Cool. I'm just going to go and stick a light on because it's getting a bit gloomy in here. I'm just wondering, are you able to still see the page? All right, I'll change this up anyway in a minute and get on with something else.
Yep, for sure. Yeah.
Okay,
Sam, I couldn't agree more. Warwick posted this, and I think, oh, hey, Dylan, I didn't know you're on. How you doing, man? Yeah, this is outstanding, and I think I think we all know his aptitude for scale. We see the big pieces, the landscapes, the monsters, and I think this is just a perfect thing. And even this little speed burst right here is might be my favorite part of the piece. But yes, this one's pretty outstanding. I love this one. I would have tried to get on the commission list if the Rabid fans didn't hop on so fast for a Galactus. But yeah, well, thanks for the kind words, folks.
Cool.
Warwick's doing some incredible things. So Warwick, are you switching over to something else right now?
Yeah. I could. This is it. So here we go. There's Krieger and Ahab, and there's Moby Dick hanging about in the background. So I mean, this sort of like there's just a note to remind me to colour his mouth in. So I could get on with another rough, sort of slightly bigger thing with a few more characters, or some inking.
It's up to you. This looks great. So can you just? Oh, so there's. I was wondering. That is very cool. I love the angle you took on that and that perspective.
Cool. Oh yeah, hang on. So I'll see if I can. just to get
It's kind of you've kind of given a little master class in um, how to really capture scale in such a, kind of a compact medium. But that looks outstanding. Wow.
Oh, cool.
The
Well,
people have spoken. Dylan says he votes inking for the next part.
he thinks inking.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah.
You're
He
still
votes
there.
inking. Yep.
Cool. That's all right. No, I'm having some tripod trouble now, but I should get onto some.
Francisco, he kind of just follows up. The highly recommend Pratt's work. Also grew up with Batman and X-Men, but the world is loaded with amazing stuff worth looking. And yeah, I can agree more, Francisco. And especially, as we chat on here too, I think, people tuning in, there's been so many, we have a really international group, and it's just been awesome keeping an open mind. And if you guys do have suggestions, chime in, let me know. Let's share, because I think this, and I just speak the North American stuff because we do have a lot of amazing art over here, but let's, don't be afraid to share. I think North American readers and collectors, we definitely need more suggestions. There's so much great stuff, and especially from art collectors, there's so many great artists we don't even have a clue that are out there. So I appreciate the suggestions, Francisco. And Jetboy says the Silver Age or the original roster: Ant-Man, Wasp, Thor, Hulk, and Golden Iron Man, picturing one story that pits the heroes against the Lord of Vampires. There you go, Warwick. Once the pandemic, let's pitch it to Marvel.
That's it. Let's do it. Definitely. Now you're gonna have to help me out, because I've dropped my tripod and whatnot, so I'm just sort of like, you get a decent view of this. Is it all right? I could move left or right, or?
No, that's good. It's centered pretty good. And I think where you're about to tackle, I think it'll be easy.
Well, this is Doctor Who. So that was what the rough looked like after a couple of goes at it. So
awesome.
So then set it all up and just plod through these crazy controls.
And I believe is this an A4 one?
Yep. So a bit of a different sort of avenue from Moby Dick, because the scale's not an issue here. But but then this is interesting because it's sort of trying to get the characters to work.
Is this the second Doctor and Jamie? Sam asks.
Yep. Second Doctor and Jamie. This
is from a good pal and collector, Rodney Hetrick. He actually hopped on Tyler Bentz's list for the sixth Doctor yesterday. So you did the second Doctor. I think Marcial Toledano did the first Doctor. And so I think Rodney's hitting up various artists in our group for the different Doctors. But this is outstanding, Warwick. Really.
Oh, cool! I've got to remember not to put my hand over the drawing while I'm doing it.
I think we can see it quite well. But
cool. Now, the sixth Doctor, that's an interesting one to choose, I would imagine. But
I love it because it forces me to do some research. I think the Doctor Who that I was exposed to as a kid was kind of that wonky old series. And I was kind of like you, Warwick, where we only had a handful of channels, but we did get a lot of British television because, CBC in Canada broadcast a lot of it. So we had like the first, Doctor Who. And as a kid, I'm just like I like Ninja Turtles and X-Men. I'm like, what is this show? And then, you just kind of, you see its evolution over time. And looking back, I'm like, man, I wish I would have paid more attention, because, this is way cooler than I thought it was as a kid.
Well,
No.
it was I mean, for us, there was like a children's television program that it was. So you get back from school, and then they'd put on, you know, it was like a block of children's telly from about sort of 3 o'clock to 5 o'clock, and then it sort of everything crashed down because then it became the news and then the grown-ups telly after that. So it was sort of a nightmare time. But you know, so you'd have this run through, and there'd be, you know, to start with, sort of really sort of you know. For real, there was like something called Play School, which is for real juniors, and then you know you'd have Scooby Doo or something chucked in, and also you know, the storytelling. There was just whole varieties of stuff. But then, as I say, as the news came on, we hopped over to the BBC Two, where you'd have like black and white serials like King of the Rocket Men or Laurel and Hardy, and that's where you'd find Sherlock Holmes and stuff. And then, so Doctor Who was evening, and that was sort of like. I don't know. It was like a proper grown-up telly. It felt like.
Oh, okay, yeah. Well, that's interesting. So Rich asks, would it be possible to see Warwick work on some of the black, red, gray inking like in Five Demon Jacket? The figures and clothes in that are just fantastic. Rich, we'll probably next time we get Warwick on, I'll bug him about some of that inking as well, because I don't know if you have anything on the slate that's similar, like some colors involved. Warwick.
No, nothing's been mentioned of that. I'm definitely up for doing that, and I mean, I just hesitate to get myself involved in something with it just now. But I mean, that's something that we could do from scratch. You know, we could start from pencil, and then so these commissions are a bit more sort of time involved, whereas some of those ones we could probably fit in quite happily to something like this. So maybe we could just start from scratch and go through the whole process.
Cool. So Sam, Warwick. I'm just going to step away for 1 minute here, so I'll just let you answer Sam's question. If I go quiet for like 1 minute, I'll be right back.
Okay.
But Sam says, have you been keeping up with the modern series of Doctor Who?
No, I haven't. I did for just the very earliest bit. I think Christopher Eccleston, and then his name's completely escaped me. I have fond memories of the giant Cyberman Christmas episode, and then after that, I watched a lot more of the Matt Smith ones than I remember, and then it just sort of fizzled out after that, and I haven't sort of caught back up again. It feels like one of those things where I feels like I have so much catching up to do to get brought up to speed, and so no, I kind of feel like I'd like to get on with that, but because when it came back, it was quite enjoyable. I really did enjoy watching it, but some of it's a bit hampered now because sort of spend too much time on the internet and listen to everyone. Sort of a lot of people bad mouthing various bits and pieces of not just that series, but any of them. So sometimes I get a bit put off with that instead. But no, it's always been a good series, so I'd quite like to get back in. But it, as I say, just sort of feels like quite a daunting exercise to get started again.
So Warwick, Reba just says, love seeing the final pieces, but it's great to be able to see how they come together like this. And Reba is a longtime fan of yours and has some of your work in her collection. I believe you're working on a large piece for her.
Yep.
A big A2 one.
Yeah. Yep. The marquee.
That's right. Yeah. Reba's a longtime collector, and she's also got an excellent eye. And for the longest time, as artists like yourself were coming on board, and Inky Knuckles was kind of growing a bit, it seemed like Reba was always one step ahead of us. You signed Warwick. I've got a A2 piece coming from him. Good eye. She was always one step ahead. So Reba definitely has the eye and has impeccable taste for sure.
Well, Reba's got one of the original cargo ships as well. I think I can't remember if it was the first or second to have a cargo actually drawn on. As I say, the first ship was the print, and that was the empty one, whereas the next ones after that started to have cargo. That was a nerve-wracking one as well, because it had to get around to Australia there, and so went in a tube, rolled up, and I did. Had my fingers crossed for the journey, because it was some way to go.
Yeah, there's always a little. It's always a little nerve-wracking, when you send stuff that far. But I think for us, I've found Canada Post does a pretty good job as long as I tend to pay the express or the priority. And yeah, Reba got the Triceratops.
Yeah. I'm fond of all those. No, yeah, but with some of the things with shipping, when I've had the biggest problems, I know I know a few people who've had trouble with stuff going missing and this, that, and the other. But what I seem to have trouble with, or seems to have just sort of been the problem for me, is where the machinery goes astray. I've had sort of artwork like cut in two, and serious sort of well packed A3 size art that's just been sort of, I don't know if it's sort of bounced off a machine or gone through some sort of sorting arms or something in the wrong way around, but it's just like totally cleaved in two pieces. And so it's the mechanical part of it that I think I've had bother with. So you wonder, sending a tube, and I think I've actually sent a tube last year. The end of it was fairly robust. That also went through some machine, but it missed the artwork inside, which I was quite pleased about.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting because I pack everything in masonite when I send it places, so it's good hard board. But if it's too flat, it can crack. If it's mishandled. So I've been putting cardboard in between two pieces of masonite on the art and just give it a little cushion. It seems to work out pretty well, but my God, there are times where I'm like, I can't believe the Postal Service would handle a package the way they handle it. Like, it looked like someone would have to set the board down and just try and stomp on it for it to end up in
oh no,
the position it did. But yeah, it's crazy. So Rich just says, also Warwick watched the same TV I did. I developed a lifelong affection for Basil Rathbone from BBC Two 6 o'clock films.
Yep. That was the Sherlock Holmes ones. I had no idea then he was the son of Frankenstein as well. So he sort of pops up later on. I started getting into Universal monster films and stuff like that. And he was over there then doing those. So in fact, I suppose it was all the same sort of time.
Yeah, that's interesting. It's very cool to see kind of where your influences come from. And it's an interesting age too, because if you're older than 25 and you grew up with some of the limitations with TV that you did, Warwick, or that I did, a lot of us did. It's really kind of interesting. You kind of miss those days of having such limited access to stuff, because right now everything is just so accessible. But
yeah, it's too quick to turn over. I mean, in those days, you kind of, as a nipper, you'd tell yourself, well, it was black and white, so is it as good? Is it going to be as great? And of course, you just get lost in them. They are as awesome, but the kids now, my kids, they see a black and white film, and they can just turn over and watch something else instead. It's that easy. Whereas we just sort of thought, well, this is what we're in for. Let's see how it turns out, and they often were ace. So worth the time, but it was like the lack of choice. We didn't have any choice, so we just had to learn to love it.
And so we got Reba on here. Reba, I hope you don't mind. I pulled your Ghost Train from with this one. This is in Reba's collection. It's that Ghost Train illustration, Warwick.
Yeah.
was this wasn't a commission. This was for your book, correct?
Yeah. That was. I think that was the first one. That's when Reba got in contact the first time. But yeah, that was. I'd done two Ghost Train books, kind of. I was sort of saying before, but it's just sort of jump in on a theme and then just sort of work my way through it. Sort of have, and then I can't remember quite what it was that started off, but it was sort of a Black Lagoon creature inside a sort of a booth. But I was sort of getting quite interested with architectural design, which was looking at originally sort of quite a few years ago, I was just drawing characters and the rest was just background, whatever else was behind on the page, and wasn't paying much attention to landscapes or design of anything like that. And so then I was sort of getting much more into sort of spooky houses, and that definitely sort of picked it up. So that Ghost Train kind of theme was looking again at sort of architectural or structural things going on, as well as signage. And I've got a sort of an interest for texts and signs and fonts and things nowadays that I never ever used to have. And so that sort of brought all that gear together. So, and it was great because you could just sit and draw monsters all over everything else as well.
Well, and looking at this piece, because I've looked at it a bunch, but I might have swiped it as when we did some promos or mailouts for you, Warwick. But
oh yeah,
I don't think I've paid enough attention to it because there is so much cool stuff in this piece. Right from the guy taking tickets at the thing, the entry to the skeletons holding open the gateway to the puppet master guy at the top, and you can even see the Ferris wheel in the background and the gorilla guy holding people, and the Elvira vampire lady. Man, this is a great piece.
Well, it was. It's
so
there's like I said, it's not so much like a sort of a puzzle kind of thing, but just I just used to draw a lot, like it maybe like it with video games. So you just spend time filling stuff up, drawing more and more into it, and also I used to, to have a book of sort of artwork or drawings or some comic books. Sometimes the story can be great and you can go through, but I like the idea of being able to go back through books that you paid for, especially, I mean, it helps now when they're so expensive, but to buy a book, you could sort of read several times, or even just not read, but go through and look at what else is there. What else is going on. People talk a lot about sort of Easter eggs and in artwork, and I quite like just the idea of some pages or some artwork being so busy that you can spend so much time with it.
Oh, that's great. Well, I'll get back to. I just want to bring something up with that too. But Reba says going on ghost trains as a kid was probably one of my favorite introductions to scary things. So the piece is nostalgic to me. So thank you.
Oh, that's cool.
And then Dylan says the gorilla is my favorite part. I think. I think so too. It's kind of hard. I don't think I've given this piece its due. I've looked at it, but I don't think I've paid close enough attention. And I think it's funny because I was talking the Ray Harryhausen piece that you did recently. When I was talking to you about it, I didn't want to refer to the things in it as Easter eggs because I didn't know if I was insulting you, because I felt like your detail and your design, the composition is always so cool and so interesting. It never feels like, okay, Warwick just threw a bunch of shit at the page. It feels like everything's very, everything fits in such a way that the composition isn't hurt by you putting additional detail in, and that was just a comment I wanted to make. I didn't want to undersell what it is you were doing. I didn't want to say, oh, there's just Easter eggs in here. You just threw stuff.
No, I mean, I like, I understand the idea, and I like the idea, especially if you can sort of communicate to fans of things, it can be nice. It is nice to sort of, for people to see stuff that, if they're a fan of whatever the subject is that like the Harryhausen. So, but it was nice that people could recognise the various bits, and some of them weren't the bear. I don't know if he ever did anything with the bear in the thing, and then the figure in the portrait was Clash of the Titans Perseus, but it was a woman, a female Perseus instead. So there's some sort of messing around with it, but it is it was nice to add those elements to it. I mean the idea was a sort of for me to my choice, the artist's choice with that, but also to sort of touch on inspiration and sort of that sort of thing, and of course, monster films, and Ray Harryhausen's really sort of the king of the monster films, and so it was very easy to do.
Absolutely, yeah.
But also, what you was just saying before as well about you can't, and sometimes I've tried. You can't quite work out what it is that's not working with some pieces of artwork. Sometimes some images, and I think at least once in recent months, or possibly even weeks, you've put all the right ideas there, but they're not necessarily in the right places, and so you end up just getting rid of it. What I'm saying is just filling it up with stuff like Easter eggs or something that's recognizable, or even filling it up with cool bits and pieces is fine, but it's not necessarily, the image has to stand by itself as well. So the composition, you kind of need to have that right at the heart of it, and then you can start to sort of to work from there.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm just sharing the Harryhausen piece right now, or I'm just in awe of some of the stuff he did, because I think, even because I never really thought about it, but the Ray Harryhausen stuff that I watched as a kid was my absolute favorite stuff. So all of a sudden, like the Allosaurus, I'm just instantly taken back, or
Yeah.
it really is outstanding. And Dylan, I'll get to your dread question here in a sec. Rich says, you're spot on about Warwick's composition. The way he sets out a drawing is really exciting, and I learned a lot from the way he does it.
Oh, cool. Thank you.
And this is just more collector stuff, but if you want something incredible, just ask an artist to draw something on his influences. Because when I read that request, Warwick, you and I didn't. I just kind of sent you the request, and you didn't. We didn't really talk about it anymore. Then all of a sudden, you showed me this, and I'm like, I didn't even know which request it was. I couldn't remember. And then I actually went back and read Aditya's request, and I'm like, oh my god, this is incredible for so many angles. And I know that he was, thrilled with this,
cool.
And it was something I don't think he ever kind of imagined would be the direction you'd take it. This is outstanding.
It was great fun, and he was very, he had a lot of suggestions, and they were great, and I was getting worried about how I could sort of synthesize it all down into the the artwork. And so I did say, I think, to you, that maybe I'd run a few ideas through by him, through you, to see, and then I suddenly sort of, I don't know, I got stuck. I suddenly realized what I could do, and sort of went with it. So, but
that's kind of, with collectors, and I tell people this all the time. It's every artist is approaching the piece as the best possible piece. So we do try and include the collectors in the process. If you've come up with 3 compositions for a piece, Warwick, and we're happy to share that if you're looking for some input from the collector. But if it's a piece like this where you're feeling it, I won't even take this back to the collector, because I don't want, and the collector won't want this either, I don't want you to be interrupted in the process. I don't want you to not run with something you're feeling. And then this is a perfect example. Like you said, you were going to come back with some ideas, and we were going to talk about it a bit, which is fine, but you were feeling it, and so you went with it. And it honestly, it's just incredible. It's full on masterpiece. And I think if you spoke to Aditya too, and I have after, and it couldn't be any better in his eyes. So.
Oh, fantastic.
And so just going back, Dylan mentions the foreground shadow, and Rich mentions the old creepy house interiors, which is the two things, like you said, your architectural design, your eye for building a room is awesome. And Dylan, the foreground shadowing, how you get the monsters, you get the Allosaurus. It just really makes the whole piece pop, and it really feels like a full room.
Cool.
Couldn't agree more. And so Dylan asked earlier, and Dylan, I think you were sleeping earlier. I think I know the answer to this question because Warwick was just talking about how Mick McMahon was his one of his most influential artists, but Dylan asks, here's a question for Warwick. Judge Dredd, Brian Boland or Mick McMahon?
Oh, it's Mick McMahon, but Mick McMahon, but crikey, that going just the Dark Judges commission, and of course I thought right that's because the 2000 stuff. I just ate it all as a kid. I just what was current, and then they reprinted stories, and quite regularly they had a monthly reprint from older ones that I'd have been too young to have read, and collected them in different ways as well. So I was quite familiar with all the old stuff, and sort of get stuck there. And so many of my influences are sort of from that time. So when I got this thing, the commission, it was a choice. There was a few other things on there, and I thought, right, I'll go and see what Mick McMahon's Dark Judges look like, and of course had a moment's look and realised he'd done a few commissions of Dark Judges, but it was all Brian Boland, and wow, going back over those Dark Judge stories, the artwork there is amazing. So no, Brian Boland's awesome, but of the two of them, he'd take a second place to Mick McMahon.
I feel like Mick McMahon and Brian Boland, that is what we call an embarrassment of riches.
Well, I didn't realize, because I was a kid and I had no interest in finding. I didn't know these guys were artists. I just reading these stories. But Dave Gibbons and Mick McMahon shared a studio, so they were doing these things together, or in the same studio space, and that would have been a place to sort of sit all afternoon or just watch those two guys working.
Oh yeah, outstanding. One, hugely influential. That's a historical studio. And Mikhail, I think this is Mikhail, I'm presuming, says when we were talking about our TV preferences and what we were being a certain age and being limited in what we have, and he's just alluding back to when we did our show, kind of focused on the Hulk stuff. And Mikhail says, like, when you guys were talking about the Hulk, everyone basically referred to the show if you're a certain age. And on that show, all four of us, myself, Mike, Ryan, and Octavio, we pretty much all referred to the Lou Ferrigno Hulk show as our kind of our first foray and our most something we all look back really fondly of. And I think a lot of it is age influence, and just like you with Sherlock Holmes and the stuff that you all the stuff you referenced earlier, Warwick, being of a certain age, the stuff you look back fondly upon. It's kind of interesting how we're all kind of influenced like that.
Yeah, and I have to be careful but I mean, it's the Batman question is the same. So anyone asks my favorite Batman, all I can see is the TV series. Forget the comics and forget the movies. It's the TV series is the one.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I try and resist it. But I can't. I mean, I loved all those. Just the Batman class. The sort of the modern classics. When I was reading. Dark Knight Returns and all that sort of stuff, and Killing Joke and Arkham Asylum, and they were all like, "Wow, this is everything's changing. It's all transforming. This is so awesome." But It's even after all that, still, Batman. I'm thinking of Adam West.
Yeah, well, it's interesting too because I think being of a certain age and how you go through these phases, I think, I grew up on that. It was in syndication and it was always on, and I always watched it. And then all of a sudden, you get a little bit older. You get those preteen years, those teen years, and oh, that's stupid. That's no fun. I want Batman. Like I want it dark and gritty. And then
Yeah,
then you age out of that, and all you can do is look back on the Batman '66 stuff fondly. And I look back on it. It's amazing. It's absolutely
yeah.
incredible that we had that.
See, I remember the day. I remember as a kid just realizing that they're not that they weren't actually taking it seriously. At some stage, I just didn't. It didn't click. There was an episode where they're talking about they're driving around England, and of course it's all sort of Southern California, and they're talking about Lord and Lady Pea Soup, and just the penny dropped. It was like, no, they're not. These aren't being serious. This isn't. It wasn't. That was the last. Up to that point, I was thinking, well, this is an action series like Star Trek. This is all. And I suddenly thought, well, hang on, but didn't change my mind.
Well, and just on the topic here, the Spider has a question too, but Dylan says he also prefers McMahon. Gibbons talking about meeting
Ah,
McMahon in his cartoonist kayfabe interview. Oh, Dylan, you have to elaborate. I haven't really been tuning into cartoonist kayfabe as much lately, just because I've been busy. But I'd be curious to hear that for sure. I
so
met Dave.
who was was it?
Oh, sorry, Warwick. Go ahead.
Just no. Who was it on the kayfabe?
Dave Gibbons was
Dave
talking about
Gibbons.
meeting McMahon for the first time. I'll have to check that out. That'll kind of
Yeah,
be.
no, I don't know that, so I'll catch up with it.
I had a brief. I met Dave Gibbons at New York a couple of years ago. It was delightful interaction.
Hmm.
We somehow got to it. He was doing just some sketches, and he was doing a signing, but it was kind of for a more off the beaten path little company. So not very many people knew about it, but we had a couple sleuths who clued us in. So it was actually a nice opportunity to talk to him. And I think that he was doing like $20 sketches of walking characters, and it was really cool.
Oh,
He was
fantastic.
he was really awesome to talk to, and obviously legendary in the game. So it was really cool. But so Spider L says, I feel like Warwick uses portraits, hanging pictures the same way Mike Mignola uses statues to create a tense atmosphere. Um, are those pictures, those portraits, some of your favorite things to draw, Warwick?
I yeah, they've become that way at the moment. It started with Mr. Higgins Comes Home because I was sort of furnishing the castle in the book, and so and there was a point where it's sort of a general grand castle down at the bottom, and then as they made their way upstairs, it sort of got creepier, and the sort of the decor started to look sort of nastier and meaner and stuff like that. But that's where I started filling in the picture frames. Some of them were just left blank, just out of choice. But then others started to actually put in some of those sort of crazy classical paintings, and I just got hooked on that. I could do that forever. So I think it's probably the case that some of the drawings I've drawn since, what I want to draw is the image in the picture frame, and then the sort of the corridor or the room that is in. Sort of had to make up just to go along with it, but those are great. I really enjoy those, and I think I've got plenty more I need to do.
No, that's awesome. It's cool to see where they were kind of conceived, and how you approach it now. And just a question on process, Warwick, you don't have that drawing taped to the pencil. I'm just curious. Is that on purpose, or just you feel like there's more freedom to not have it confined?
Uh, I've just not. I think I've thought about it before, but then sometimes I sort of have a peep underneath to see have I got it right, and sometimes I'm changing it. It gets changed while it's being drawn. So if I could, change an angle on something or by turning the page, so sometimes it's handy to keep it separate.
Oh, cool.
But I've never,
I
yeah,
don't.
no, I never tape it sort of down, and I don't tend to move it around too much. I've seen people who, inking videos where they're swinging it around all over the shop, which I think I've probably done on this one a couple of times already so far. But I didn't necessarily think it was something I was doing often.
That's interesting. I think there's always a lot of fluidity to your work and movement and motion, and I think that it's funny that the end result, it seems like there's a lot of fluidity as you're working to the process, and it kind of creates this extra motion in your the end result, which I think is very cool as well.
Yeah, there's there it the I mean this is the rough, and this is sort of how it's going to go. But when I'm working from roughs and pencils, it is pretty much what's underneath. But I don't start an image necessarily knowing how it's going to turn out. Not how it's going to turn out, but even what it's going to be. The Moby Dick, what I wanted to get was a close up of characters while at the same time having a fairly substantial character in the distance, because he had to be in the distance to fit in the thing. So I had to work out a way compositionally of getting those things to work. Whereas this one's different. Sort of, I'm trying to get the likenesses as best I can, but quite often I'm starting a piece of work and don't necessarily quite know how it's definitely going to finish, whether certain things are going to become more prominent than others, and so even when it goes to the ink stage, most of the working's all done in pencil, and I don't go sort of wildly off with the ink, but they can still change at that stage.
It reminds me, and it's not a fair comparison, but it's like when Michael Scott in the American version of The Office, sometimes he starts a sentence and he says he doesn't even know where it's going to end up.
Yeah. I think I
Yeah.
probably do that as well.
There's times too where I watch that episode and I feel like that feels very very on point for me sometimes too. But no, it's really cool. I think I like and we talk about this. I try and just kind of relay experiences or things I see amongst artists in the group too. And I think yourself, you share something, and Troy kind of pointed this out with Gerardo Zaffino, just that confidence and that boldness in the inking, and I feel like yours is a lot the same, where you know what you're trying to accomplish and what you're going to accomplish, but it's kind of still a little bit of a journey, and you're boldly and you're confidently throwing down inks, and I think it's very cool to just see that confidence, and even knowing yourself, you're not totally aware of where it's going, like bang on, but you're confident in what you're doing, and so I think that's outstanding. I just love seeing the confidence and the aptitude, and everything's coming together. It's kind of that journey, which is it's cool, because sometimes I think us non-artists just think, okay, Warwick's got an image in his head, bang, print out.
No. There was a thing on just going around Twitter a while ago of. It was an apple. It was like 5 different sorts of apple. What sort of apple do you think of when you're drawing? And there'd be like I don't know. It was sort of quite a pixelated one, or a black and white one, and people were sort of making suggestions and sort of quite surprised. But a few people, myself included, were sort of saying, "Well, I don't really, I don't have an image in my mind of it. I wouldn't be drawing an apple on a page with a sort of an image in my mind exactly of what it's going to be." And I couldn't quite work out. Some people were finding it quite hard to imagine or understand, but it's sort of just like, I think probably millions of different apples are whizzing through my head at the time. So you know, it's trying to see what happens when it comes out on the page is the big deal.
No, that's oh, that's very cool. It's just awesome to see some insight into your process, Warwick, because um, everything you do is so unique. I think there's definitely things that people gravitate towards for you, specifically
Mm.
Magnolaverse, the Victorian era stuff, some of your architecture and design. But every time you tackle something outside of that, it's amazing as well. And I think, it's just very interesting to see that process, because even though people are attracted to these various things with you, by no means are you confined to just that. Um,
Mm.
so in saying that, anyone who wants on Warwick's next list, don't be afraid to hit us up with some crazy requests.
So
Obviously, nothing offensive and nothing,
yeah,
terrible, but because you do have some. There was a lot of Victorian era Magnolia requests on this list for sure. But you have some outside the box ones too, and it's all turning out quite stunning.
yeah. Well, this was I mean, these two, the Doctor Who and the Moby Dick, nice to come along. I think I've drawn both before to some extent, varying extents, but so yeah, no, it's great. It's great to have a subject to sort of to jump into and try it. And then the Dark Judges, as I say, it's been a while since a really long time since I've drawn those, and a while since I've had a good look. So it was a great commission to do because I just got to get lost all in that 2000 AD stuff from my youth, and then draw those characters, and so it was really good fun.
No, yeah, that's great. Well, no, I mentioned it last week on the show too. I've just been really impressed with the collectors and the requests that have been coming our way, specifically for artists. Because I always kind of you always think that you have the best ideas, and I think I've developed an okay eye for art and requests as I go. But people are coming at us with requests that I haven't even crossed my mind ever,
Yeah.
and I'm almost I'm almost embarrassed because I'm like, this is brilliant. Why didn't I think of this? Kind of thing.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's a funny thing about, I mean, doing this as a job is interesting because, when as an illustrator, you don't know who's going to be asking for what next, and so, and so it's quite easy I'm quite happy to sort of embrace all the ideas. As I say, back when I had an agent many years ago, I got onto a good gig with a really boring business magazine, and there's this article at the back which would have been very interesting if you were an investor or whatever, but it was dull as all hell. And so they needed an illustration to go in, and I managed to, I was doing a weekly illustration for them for a year or two, and it was fun, and it was a good job, and it was and it was nice to do, but it was all fairly boring stuff. So it meant that I had a portfolio full of, a businessman on a horse with a knight's helmet, or a businessman doing this, or 5 businessmen standing in a queue. It was just the same stuff.
Yeah.
And so it was interesting because I'd never have thought to draw those. And admittedly, after a time, I got a bit bored of drawing them on a weekly basis. But so yeah, no, always welcome anything new coming along.
Oh, cool. That's great. And Dylan says, I can't come up with a request better than Hellboy and Etrigan sharing a beer, though. Um, Neither can I, Dylan. And I know I don't know if Reba's still on and listening, but she's a big Etrigan fan, and I could not believe that wasn't her piece. I was surprised that wasn't hers, but yeah, that piece I think is going to go down in Warwick lore as something legendary, and everything you're doing. But that piece just makes me really happy because it's just like, it's dark and crazy and obscure, but it's also one of those things that just kind of makes you smile because you want to be in the room sharing a beer with those two. You know,
Oh yeah.
yeah, I love that piece. And then Rich says, I think I can see now that Adam West's tubby spirit lurks in many of Warwick's characters.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Yeah. Know that the Hellboy Etrigan, the Hellboy reading comics, the Harryhausen, the Dark Judges. Yeah, you're on a bit of a roll, sir. I must say.
Well, thanks. No, this is ace. And funny enough, it's a funny situation we're in at the moment. But my drawing seems to have slowed down quite considerably. I was like I said right at the beginning, I was so excited about the different subjects. I thought we could tear through these and get on with them. And then I think one of them took me nearly a week to get done or whatever. But no, I mean I'm enjoying it a lot. So
No, that's great. And yeah, don't be too hard on yourself. You're the frequency at which you're able to, do some of these incredible pieces is, I just know a lot of artists, it takes longer. Everyone's different, and how apt they are, how much, care is put into certain parts of the process. Some people work better quicker, some people work better slower. So don't be too hard on yourself. But and Dylan, just back to says I just couldn't believe I hadn't seen those two characters together before, Etrigan and Hellboy.
yeah, because I did have it was one of those things you should have a quick Google, a quick search just to see, because you don't want to come up with something, that someone's already done, in terms of the composition or what they're up to, and unless you know that it's something some people have asked for already. But it was surprising that I didn't see that many. There was only one, I think, or two other Google searches that came up with the pair together. But I think they were fighting, which made it much easier. So having them sit down and having a drink together was much easier to do.
When there's Reba says, I only wish it was mine, but have to admit I'd never have thought of it. Love Hellboy wearing Magnola on his T-shirt in that one. And
that was one of those that just suddenly thought, well, what sort of T-shirt? Is he just going to have a black T-shirt? And I thought, well, that's you've probably got to put something on there.
And I'm just sharing the image now, Warwick, as we're looking, and I'll zoom in on that. That's so perfect for so many reasons. This is an all-timer for sure. And then Spider Elf says Hellboy and Batman in a creepy castle is my favorite. I love how scared Batman looked.
Oh yeah, I saw someone mention that. Yeah, no, I just like the idea. These guys, I think they were both ready to pounce if something jumped out at them, but it doesn't mean they're not a bit nervous as they're creeping around the place. So
I will see if I can find that one as well. Just bear with me, folks. I'm sure you guys get to see Warwick continuing to draw, but I'll see if I can't find that one just so we can have a look at that as well. The least I can do is make myself somewhat useful. As I'm just sitting here and watching the wizard do his thing. I might have to pull that one off of Twitter. So you've got Moby Dick, Doctor Who, and what else? What's the next one after that, Warwick, that you were
the next one, and the next possible rough before I started inking for this was it's another Hellboy one, and it's a big one because it's Hellboy in a tavern, sort of surrounded by Hellboy characters.
Nice.
So there's a lot of folk in there, or there's going to be a few folk in there. So. And there's a few more Hellboy, and I'm trying to think off the top of my head. And I know there's a couple more Hellboys coming, and there's some others, some quite unusual. certainly one character I've not drawn before. So
Well, and with that very obscure request, Warwick. Well, we'll talk about that one when you get to it, because we want you
sure.
to have as much fun with that as you possibly want. Have you seen the movie yet?
You're just breaking up somehow. Not yet, no. But it's on that famous to-do list.
Yeah, well, and
So
obviously
I will
no
be
pressure.
very soon.
I such fond memories of that movie. I won't spoil what it is, because I think Warwick too. I think it's always just really cool um, to see you tackle some of this stuff that is really kind of off the beaten path for you. But I think it's stuff that'll be very cool once it's done. Um, okay, I found Batman. It'll take me a second to show it here. And Dylan says that was a nice touch. The Mignola on Hellboy's shirt. Has Mignola drawn Etrigan yet in his recent charity sketches? I have. Oh, whoops. Oh, sorry, guys. It looks like we might have lost Warwick momentarily. We'll give him a second or two. If he doesn't come back on, we may have to just continue with this another day. And Brian, our apologies. I'll just see if Warwick, he might have just stepped out briefly. It wasn't on purpose. I think he might have just lost connection. But yeah, we'll have to get back to those questions. I will just shoot him a message, and I'll put kind of a default up here just to have a look at. Etrigan, so you guys don't have to look at me. I'll just shoot him a message and see what's up. I think we'll probably cut it just a little bit short. We're a few minutes away from kind of wrapping up anyways, guys. So Brian, I'll talk to I'll shoot Warwick a message just on your question, and we'll answer it on some form somewhere, and we'll have Warwick back on. That was a ton of fun. He did a lot and some really cool stuff. So guys, I think we'll probably call it there. I appreciate everyone hopping on. We do have one more art show tonight. And then we've got a trifecta. We're not going to be doing, what we normally do by showing off collections, because we have 3 incredible artists who are all going to be drawing tonight. So we have Stefan Rue, a special guest from one of the most interesting fellas I've ever met. Stefan will be on. He's going to be doing some drawing. We'll talk with him a bit. Gerardo will be there as he normally is on Saturday nights. And also, special guest, his first appearance along with Stefan is Evan Cagle. And I know a lot of you who are familiar with Evan's stuff know how amazing Evan is. So this will be, he's going to be working on some things. I'm not sure exactly what, but Evan is a really interesting dude, and that guy's work is otherworldly. So tune in tonight. That'll be on at 8 Mountain Time. I'll do a post here. So join in, hit up Evan, Stefan, and Gerardo. Lots of questions. The whole show is going to be centered around those guys and what they're doing. So thanks, everyone. Thanks for the cool words. Oh, just 1 second before we go. I think Warwick.
Back. Sorry, battery failure.
No worries. I told the folks that we'll probably just cut it short, but I do have a question here from Brian, if Brian's still on. Any tips on two-tone inking, like your black and gray work? I always loved those black and orange motorbike sketches you posted on your blog a long while ago.
I've always had sort of a real battle with color. It's a real scrap to get it and to work it out, and I just find it hard work. So I do it digitally almost all the time, and it was so much easier than trying to get it done any other way. So particularly probably around those bike. What I just did with those is just, it's like color coded drawing. Instead of, I didn't think of it as color, but just changed it up, and that sort of carries on. Those bikes, I liked how they turned out. So and that sort of carries on with a few other things. I did some ice cream trucks at one stage with much more color, and that sort of translated into the characters in 5 Demon Jacket, that book we were talking about, where you're sort of using reds and bits and pieces. So it was just the idea of a color coded drawing kind of thing. So choosing which is going to be black or which is going to be gray, and then also which is going to be those, getting some color in there. Just everything looks better. So I worked for so long with just pencil, because it was comfortable, and I didn't have to. I was doing early illustration work, and if the paint and the ink or the whatever, if it messed up, I'd have to redraw it, and the drawings got weaker and weaker and weaker as I kept reproducing them. So working digitally was always really handy. So now I'm sort of trying to make myself get the ink going and get the color going, and so the answer, I've already said, but I mean, I just treated it more like just a different element of drawing rather than thinking about the color. So I think it's probably then much less in terms of realistic, but in terms of sort of what you're trying to draw attention to and things like that. So
cool.
And how it balances on the page back to composition as well, I suppose.
No, that's interesting, because I think with your color work, people are attracted to when you do bring those elements of color in. But our focus, with the commission list and everything, has been your ink work. So that's something we haven't touched on as much. So thanks, Brian. Thanks for the question. And you can see it there too, Warwick. He says, thank you. It adds great depth to your work.
Thanks.
But yeah, guys, I think that's probably it. I told Warwick, I can't remember if I told you an hour, and we did almost 2, which is fine. These things tend to go 2, and if they go longer, it's because we're having fun. And no, Warwick, honestly, that was awesome. Seeing the ink and seeing those pencils come together so quick was pretty phenomenal, I must say. So
cool.
And guys, harass Warwick on social medias to do this again. He's been very agreeable so far. So one of these times he might tell me to beat it, but we'd love to do this more often.
Yeah, and you sort of mentioned, but I mean, maybe like one of those the witch figures, something like that. We could do the whole one, whole lot together. So
absolutely, yeah, that'd be great. Well, and thanks, guys, for tuning in. Warwick and I will chat, and maybe we'll do like he said, probably do as much of a piece as Warwick can fit in from inception, pencils right through the inks. One of these times, I think that'd be really cool, because we did get segments of it. It was just different pieces, which was really awesome in its own right. So, but yeah, I think that's it, guys. Warwick, awesome, greatly appreciated.
Thanks. Thanks for having me along. I hope it was interesting.
Oh, that was outstanding. And just watch. Honestly, it's therapeutic watching the inks get laid down and the pencils work, and it coming in to create an image like it does. So, but yeah, I think that's all for this morning. Like I mentioned earlier, we're doing another one tonight. Warwick will probably be snoring, sound asleep at that point.
I would hope so. Yeah.
But awesome. Thanks, Warwick.
I'll catch you up afterwards.
Great. Okay, guys, thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you tonight.